All right, let's dive in today, shall we? We're tackling pharmacogenomics, which basically means how our genes can affect how our bodies react to different medications.
Sounds complicated.
Yeah, it can be, but it's super interesting. And you gave us a great research article to break down.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Pharmacogenomic Evaluation of CYP2C19 alleles linking low clopidogrel response and the risk of acute coronary syndrome in Indians.
Okay.
And it was published in the Journal of Gene Medicine.
All right.
So have you ever wondered why some people seem to respond way better to certain medications than others?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, that's kind of the basis of, personalized medicine, right?
Exactly, and that's what we're going to explore today. And thankfully, we have our expert here who can help us understand all the science and what it means for, like everyday life.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Right.
I think this study is a really good example of how understanding our genes can help us develop more personalized and effective medical treatments.
I'm ready to learn. So first things first, can you give us like a quick overview of what clopidogrel is and why it's so important?
Sure. So clopidogrel is a medication that helps prevent blood clots. It's often prescribed to people who have heart conditions or maybe they've had a stroke, things like that. And it helps prevent, future heart attacks or other serious cardiovascular issues.
So it's pretty important for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
What makes clopidogrel so interesting from like a pharmacogenomics point of view?
Well, what's really fascinating about clopidogrel is that it doesn't actually work right away in its initial form.
Okay.
It actually needs to be converted by enzymes in the liver into an active form. And that's where your genes come into play, because variations in your genes can actually affect how efficiently those enzymes do their job.
So someone's genes could determine whether or not clopidogrel is effective for them.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Can you talk a little bit more about the specific gene involved in this process?
Absolutely. So one of the key players here is a gene called CYP2C19. And there are different versions of this gene called alleles. And these alleles can affect how quickly or slowly someone metabolizes the drug.
I feel like metabolize is one of those words I vaguely remember from high school bio, but
Yeah.
can you give me a refresher? What does that actually mean in this context?
So think of it this way. Your body is constantly processing, like substances that you take in, right? Whether it's food or medication. Metabolizing basically means breaking down those substances and converting them into forms that your body can use or eliminate.
Okay.
So in the case of clopidogrel, your CYP2C19 gene determines how fast your body can transform the drug into its active form.
Got it. Okay, so different variations of the CYP2C19 gene, different speeds of metabolizing the drug. How does that then impact how well it actually works for different people?
So researchers have actually identified 4 main categories of metabolizers based on these CYP2C19 gene variations.
4, okay, lay 'em on me.
So we've got ultra-rapid metabolizers, expensive metabolizers, intermediate metabolizers, and poor metabolizers. And as you can imagine, the names are pretty descriptive. They really reflect how fast the drug gets converted based on someone's genes.
So if you're an ultra-rapid metabolizer, does that mean the drug works like super well for you?
Well, not necessarily. It might seem like faster is better, but ultra-rapid metabolizers can actually face a higher risk of bleeding because the drug becomes active so quickly.
Okay, so that's not necessarily a good thing. What about the other types of metabolizers?
So extensive metabolizers are kind of right in the middle. They break down clopidogrel at what we consider a normal rate. And generally, that's the group that achieves the desired effect from the medication.
Okay.
Then we have intermediate metabolizers who process the drug a bit slower than extensive metabolizers, so they may not get the full benefits.
Got it.
And then lastly, we have poor metabolizers. And as you might guess, that's not really ideal.
Right.
Poor metabolizers have very low enzyme activity, meaning their bodies have a hard time converting clopidogrel into that active form. So they're actually at a higher risk of developing blood clots because the drug isn't really working as it should.
This is so interesting. So it really is your genes that are dictating whether or not a medication is going to work for you.
Yeah.
So with clopidogrel, it seems like extensive metabolizer is where you want to be.
Exactly.
But I'm curious, the research you mentioned, why did they look specifically at the Indian population?
Well, the Indian population is particularly interesting because they actually have a higher prevalence of certain CYP2C19 gene variations. And they also have a higher risk of cardiovascular events compared to some other populations.
Okay.
So it makes it a really relevant group to study when you're trying to understand that connection.
Gotcha. So what were the researchers trying to find out in this particular study?
So their main goal was to understand the relationship between different CYP2C19 variations, how people respond to clopidogrel, and their risk of developing something called acute coronary syndrome, or ACS.
Okay. ACS is kind of an umbrella term that covers conditions like unstable angina, heart attack, stuff like that.
So they were looking to see if there was a correlation between those specific gene variations and the likelihood of having a heart problem, particularly if you're taking clopidogrel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And they had like a decent sample size for this?
Yeah. They had a pretty large group of participants from India, 645 people who had experienced ACS, and then they also had 546 healthy individuals as a control group.
Gotcha.
And they analyzed the participants' DNA, focusing on 3 variations of that CYP2C19 gene, the star2, star3, and star17.
I remember seeing the stars. What do those stars represent again?
So those stars are basically just a way to denote different alleles or versions of the gene.
Okay.
So for example, star 2 represents a specific allele of the CYP2C19 gene that's linked to slower clopidogrel metabolism.
Gotcha. Okay, so they've got their people, they've looked at their genes. What did they find? Any big aha moments? Yeah, there were definitely some really interesting findings. They found that star 2 allele, the one associated with the slower metabolism, was linked to a higher risk of ACS in this population.
So that makes sense, right? Because poor metabolizer is a higher risk.
Exactly.
What about the other alleles? Did they find anything interesting with those?
Yeah. Interestingly, they found that the star 17 allele seemed to actually have like a protective effect, meaning people with that allele might actually be metabolizing clopidogrel very efficiently.
So wait, if star 2 means slower and star 17 means faster, wouldn't that mean that star 17 is better? But I thought we were saying being an ultra-rapid metabolizer was risky.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's important to remember that we're talking about specific outcomes here, right? While ultra-rapid metabolizers, they can have a higher risk of bleeding, this study was specifically focused on the risk of ACS. And in that context, the star 17 allele actually appeared to be beneficial. But more research is needed to understand the broader implications of the star 17 allele and how it relates to other potential risks.
Gotcha. So it really just depends on what you're looking at. It's not as simple as saying, oh, this allele is good, this allele is bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. What else did they find?
Well, another important finding was that they found a higher prevalence of intermediate and poor metabolizers in the ACS group compared to the healthy controls.
So there's definitely a correlation between the genetics and how well that medication works, at least in this population.
Exactly, yeah. And this study really provides strong evidence that tailoring treatment based on someone's CYP2C19 genotype could be incredibly beneficial.
So how would that work? Like, how would you use this information in a practical setting? You'd have to do genetic testing on everybody.
Yeah, so it's actually simpler than you might think. A simple blood test or even a cheek swab can be used to analyze someone's DNA and figure out their CYP2C19 genotype.
So you could potentially get tested before you even start taking the clopidogrel?
Exactly, yeah. Ideally, you would have that genetic information beforehand, and that would allow doctors to really personalize the treatment decisions right from the start, and they could choose the medication and the dosage that would be most effective and safe for each individual, and hopefully prevent any bad reactions.
That sounds like the future of medicine. It's like having a specific instruction manual for your body.
Yeah.
I think that's a great place to maybe take a little break.
Okay.
We've covered a lot in this first part. We've talked about, what clopidogrel is, CYP2C19 variations, the key findings in this study. But in the next part, I want to explore more about the broader implications of this research. Like, what does this mean for personalized medicine, and what could it mean for all of us?
Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
We'll be right back.
So, we're back, diving deeper into the world of pharmacogenomics. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, how understanding our genes could really change the way we approach medical treatment.
Absolutely. And this research really drives that point home. Like, imagine being able to use genetic information to say, hey, this person might not respond well to clopidogrel, and then being able to prevent some serious heart problems.
Right, exactly. It's all about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to medicine and being able to personalize treatment plans.
And it seems like that's where things are heading, which is pretty exciting. But I do wonder about the practical side of things. So are we talking about like testing everyone who might need clopidogrel?
That's a great question, and I think it's important to clarify that routine genetic testing for CYP2C19, it isn't quite standard practice yet, but this research and other studies like it are really building a strong case for considering it more widely.
Okay, so where do we stand right now? Are there any guidelines for doctors in terms of how to use this genetic information?
Yes, actually. There's an organization called the Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium, or CPIC, and they've developed guidelines specifically for CYP2C19 genotype and clopidogrel therapy.
Okay.
These guidelines are evidence-based, and they're really designed to help doctors make informed prescribing decisions based on that genetic information.
That's good to know.
No.
So even though the genetic testing isn't routine yet, there's at least a framework in place for doctors to use it.
Right, and it's a very dynamic field. So the CPIC guidelines are constantly being updated as new research comes out. So we're always learning more.
Speaking of learning more, I have a feeling clopidogrel is just the tip of the iceberg here. Are there other medications where our genes can really impact how we respond to them?
Oh, absolutely. Clopidogrel is a great example, but pharmacogenomics goes way beyond just this one drug.
Hmm.
There are many other medications out there, including those for mental health conditions, cancer, pain management, where variations in our genes can significantly affect how well the drugs work and also the side effects people might experience.
It seems like the possibilities are pretty much endless. So, as we continue to kind of unlock these secrets about how our genes interact with medications, it really could revolutionize healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. The more we learn, the better equipped we'll be to personalize those treatments, prevent those bad reactions to medications, and improve overall health outcomes. It's all about giving people more information so they can make informed decisions about their health.
That makes sense. So, for our listeners out there who are thinking, this is really cool, I want to get tested, should they be like running out to get genetic testing done?
I think that's an important question. And like many things in healthcare, the answer is not a simple yes or no. It's always best to talk to your doctor first.
So, no self-diagnosing or ordering genetic tests online without consulting a healthcare professional.
Exactly, because their guidance is really crucial. And remember that genetic testing, it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's valuable information, but it doesn't tell the whole story. There are other factors to consider as well. Well, for one, it's important to remember that genetic testing for medication response, it's still relatively new. So while there's growing evidence to support its use, there are still unanswered questions, and the science is constantly evolving. So it's important to stay informed.
Okay.
Also, cost can be a factor. Genetic testing can be expensive, and insurance coverage varies. So that's another thing to discuss with your doctor.
Those are all good points. But overall, it seems like the potential benefits of pharmacogenomics are huge. Like if we could use this information to prescribe medications more effectively and safely, it seems like it would be a major step forward for healthcare.
I agree, and I think that's the vision we're all working towards, this future where personalized medicine is the norm and people can have better and safer healthcare.
It's a pretty powerful vision, and I think this has been a really enlightening conversation. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. You've explained a pretty complex topic in a way that I think is really easy to understand and engaging.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to see so much interest in this field and its potential.
Before we wrap up this part, I have one final thought-provoking question for our listeners. And it kind of gets to the heart of what all of this means for each of us individually. So this research we've been talking about, it focused on a pretty specific group of people in India and a specific medication, clopidogrel. But I want to zoom out a little bit and think about the bigger picture here. What could all of this mean for, like, our listeners personally? Like, could genetic testing help them understand how their own bodies process medications, maybe even ones they're already taking?
It's a fascinating question, and what's really exciting is that this research really opens up so many possibilities. Like, if we could actually start predicting how individuals are going to respond to medications based on their genes, then we could potentially, like, avoid those negative side effects and actually fine-tune dosages to make them more effective.
Yeah, it's like having a personalized roadmap for how your body interacts with drugs.
Exactly. Pharmacogenomics is really all about recognizing that we're not all the same, and our genes play a really important role in how our bodies work.
So if we're thinking about the future of healthcare, are we headed towards a world where everyone just gets their genome sequenced at birth?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, as the cost of genetic sequencing continues to decrease, and we learn more about this whole field of pharmacogenomics, widespread genetic testing could very well become a reality.
It's kind of wild to think about, like, doctors having access to your genetic information right from the start. They could tailor treatments from day one and really minimize those risks and hopefully maximize the chances of success.
Right, that's the ultimate goal, to use this information to create these personalized healthcare plans that are just safer and more effective for everybody.
It's a powerful vision, but I also think about, like, anytime we have new technologies, there are ethical considerations to keep in mind.
Absolutely. We need to be having some really open and honest conversations
Hmm.
about things like data privacy and potential biases, just to make sure that this technology is used responsibly and equitably.
Yeah, it makes me think about who should have access to our genetic information? Should it be shared with insurance companies, employers? Those are some big questions.
Yeah, those are really complex questions with no easy answers.
Yeah.
We need to really carefully weigh the potential benefits and risks of sharing this information because it's very sensitive, and we need to develop really clear guidelines to protect people's privacy and prevent discrimination.
It's definitely something that we need to be thinking about very carefully as this field progresses. But for now, let's bring it back to our listeners. What's the one key message that we want them to take away from our deep dive today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that pharmacogenomics really has the potential to transform healthcare. It's a really exciting field. There's so much we're learning, and it could really help us improve treatment outcomes and reduce those adverse drug reactions.
Yeah, it's all about recognizing that everyone's unique and our genes play a huge part in how we respond to medications.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to be more proactive about their healthcare and to explore these new approaches that could lead to better health outcomes for them.
This has been such a fantastic journey into the world of pharmacogenomics. We've covered so much, from the basic science to some of the bigger ethical questions. A huge thank you to our expert for being such a fantastic guide today.
My pleasure. It's been great talking about this.
And to all of our listeners out there, we hope you found this deep dive informative and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep exploring the amazing world of science and health. Until next time, happy deep diving.